While he's bringing those up, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Dr. Martin Chalfie, who is a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Columbia University, and shared the 2008 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his introduction of green fluorescent protein as a biological marker. He earned his PhD from Harvard University and did postdoc research with Sidney Brenner at the MRC Lab of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, England. As a postdoc fellow with John Sulston, he established the first genetic model for mechanosensation using the nematode C. elegans. He and his lab subsequently used molecular, genetic, and electrophysiologic means to study neuronal specification, differentiation, outgrowth and degeneration, microtubule structure and function, and mechanosensory transduction in its modulation in C. elegans. He is a past president of the Society of Developmental Biology of the American Society of Cell Biology, and is a member of the U.S. National Academies of Sciences and Medicine and a foreign member of the Royal Society. He also chairs the Committee on Human Rights of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and we are very excited to have him here today.
Terrific. So I'll just start. As you can see, that I have this very long title to my talk, but it's going to be about really looking at the activities that I've been involved with the Committee on Human Rights of the U.S. National Academies. And before I start, I want to thank Carlos Del Rio for the invitation to come here, and I appreciate that all of you are participating in this. So let me start with the question of why national academies should even be interested in working in human rights, and I'll give a couple of reasons for this. One is that we think that an understanding of human rights, norms, and principles is actually very important for those working to enhance human well-being. And second reason, academies and their members, we feel, have a special voice when responding to human rights abuses that involve people doing the sorts of things that the academies are responsible for, that is, involving science, research, and scholarship. And a final reason is that we feel that scientific progress depends upon respect for human rights, the right to freedom of speech, association, and movement. And in fact, we have even put together a brochure to help other academies actually join this. And I'll say more about our involvement with other national academies worldwide. But for now, I just want to talk a bit about the Committee on Human Rights, which I've been the chair of for about 10 years, and to say something about our activities and what we're concerned about. So I've also given the URL to the Academy website. All our resources, all of the information that we make public is available there. It's I feel, a very good resource for people that are interested in this combination of human rights and health and science and engineering, because that's what we work on. We try to create and serve as a bridge between human rights and scientific communities. And we want to promote human rights also within the three national academies, the Academy of Sciences, of Medicine, and Engineering. In fact, though, we work on behalf of anyone who has been subjected to major human rights abuses where they affect natural and social scientists, engineers, health professionals, anywhere in the world, and including the United States. And I'll say a little bit more about what we consider about major human rights abuses. Our work is involved in sort of three general areas. One is advocacy for people who have been accused or even worse, and have had major human rights abuses. We also provide, where we can, assistance. And finally, we have been very involved in awareness raising on these various issues. And so to tell you who I mean by the Committee on Human Rights, it's a group of 15 of us. I didn't put my picture here, but here is all of the other people, which are people from the three academies, plus the three international uh, 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 people that are in charge from the various academies. So the people in red are the members from NAM, and you can see that Carlos is the international secretary that's involved as well. People usually have a 3 uh, year term and then rotated off. Um, and so it's always a new group of people that add their suggestions. In addition to these people, we provide an opportunity for members of the three national academies to serve as CHR correspondents. These are people that help us in action alerts, or we might call on for their expertise. And we have over 1,400 members of the three academies that serve as CHR correspondents. We're now recently trying to set up a way, because we have a newsletter that we think will be of interest to others, and all our publicly available information. We're trying to set up ways that we can reach the general public at large and have people sign up for our monthly newsletters and so on. So that's in the works right now. But most of this stuff that we do is through the members of the three national academies. The work of the committee is really done by the staff that we have, led by our director, Becca Everly, and our deputy director, Patty Evers, who are astonishing people. Actually, all five of these people are astonishing. Tracy, Anna, and Pam as well. And in fact, in all that I'm going to be talking about, I have to say, Ed Kravitz is a wonderful scientist friend at Harvard neuroscience meeting. And Ed, in all of his talks, says a very interesting phrase that is very appropriate here. And that phrase is, when I say I mean we. And when I say we, I mean they. And it really is the case that the work of the committee is done by these five individuals, and it has been tremendous. So let me go through these three areas that we've been involved in, and then I will sort of try to narrow down a little bit more in terms of health-related questions, which I think people might be perhaps a little more interested in. So the first is the idea of advocacy. We work on behalf of scientists, engineers, health professionals, uh, anywhere in the world who have been subjected to severe repression in violation of their human rights. In particular, the violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, various human rights conventions that have been signed by countries, and the country's own constitution, which often lists rights that people have. So one thing I want to say in regard to this is, we don't write people in other countries and say, this is what we think is the is our important human rights. These are our opinions. No, we always say that these are the rights that your country has signed onto and agreed to, and we feel that they have violated those rights. So some of the rights listed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was issued in 1948, are listed here. The right not to be subjected to torture or cruel and inhuman degrading punishment or treatment, the right to be not to be subjected to arbitrary detention, a right to a fair and public hearing, a right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, the right to freedom of opinion and expression, the right to freedom of association, and the right to share scientific advancement and its benefits. And I might also add that there's really a lot of discussion about what is the right to science and being able to have the fruits of scientific achievement. Um, and that's an ongoing discussion. What are the what do we mean by the types of major human rights abuses? Uh, to list a few, there are some of them would be considered gross violations with regard to legal prosecutions, such as charges or arrests on flimsy or no basis, pre-trial detention, trial proceedings, or imprisonment, all of which are against universal norms of legal prosecutions. In addition to this, there are other human rights violations, which can be citizenship withdrawal, harassment and threats, disappearance, and extrajudicial execution. Our advocacy on behalf of individuals that have suffered these abuses in the almost 50 years that we've been in existence, we've had about 1,500 cases in 85 different countries, really all over the world. I should say maybe a quick sentence of why the CHR was started. The CHR was started in 1976 because members of the National Academy of Sciences started to be very concerned about the situation of the physicist Andrei Sakharov in the Soviet Union. And that was really the initial start of the committee. But as you can see, we've worked on behalf of quite a number of people. I want to give you a couple of examples of people that we've helped or people that we have tried to help and the situations they've been in, because I think in some cases we are not as aware of these things as possible. So the first example I want to give is from Iran. Mahmoud Badavam and Ramin Zabai are members of what sounds like a very sophisticated sort of institution, the Baha'i Institute of Higher Education. But let me explain what this is. The Baha'i Institute of Higher Education grew out of the problem that in Iran, although there is some religious freedom in their constitution, for example, for Jews or Protestants or Catholic, and for people that believe in Islam, it doesn't, it prohibits belief in Baha'i. I'm not entirely sure what the reason is, although I suspect it is that Baha'i came after Islam, and so they don't allow it. And one of the things that they have done is they've said that no student who is of the Baha'i religion can go to university. And so members of the Baha'i faith, as these two men are, put together courses that they could teach to students in people's living rooms. And this teaching in living rooms is the Baha'i Institute for Higher Education. And they and others have been arrested and convicted of teaching students in living rooms and given 5-year prison sentences for this, for teaching. Muntasir Ibrahim is a geneticist in Sudan, and he was arrested uh, because he was advocating for human rights and was arrested for a while. Uh, he was then uh, let out when the regime changed, but now you know there's an enormous amount of problems in Sudan, and they're still very concerned about his and other people's safety there. And the final example from the United States, Gang Chen, a mechanical engineer at MIT, was subject to arrest and accusations as part of the China initiative, and was eventually exonerated and released. But this gives you an idea of the types of people that we have been advocating for. We have a variety of advocacy tools. These include action alerts, where we send letters that are really co-signed by the correspondents, many of the correspondents. We send letters. We reach out to U.S. government officials, as well as any other groups that in positions to help people. We try to facilitate direct action by the Academy members and by universities. We write op-ed pieces and articles. Uh, we had one, for example, on Nicaragua that came out in Nature a while ago, about a year or two ago. We have a way of submitting um, cases there's a UNESCO confidential complaints organization that we can submit these to. And two things about that. First, we realized that this was a terrific way for law students to learn about human rights law and putting these things together. So we've partnered with several law schools, uh, getting help from their students on writing these complaints. The UNESCO committee has the right to call in countries and ask them about human rights situations, and to actually ask them back every 6 months to see how things have progressed. They've told us that we are their number one source of information about scientists, engineers, and health professionals. We've in the past had missions to and other international outreach to other countries. We've sort of publicized people at risk by nominating them for awards, giving them more visibility. And we've also conducted embassy visits where I've gone and talked with people to make personal pleas. Most of the work we do, however, is actually behind the scenes. You won't be able to go to our website and see who we are currently working on behalf of, because we feel that we should be doing this in a private way. We're not naming and shaming. We want to help the people that have been subjected to these human rights abuses. I'm going to go on to assistance. We do a number of things with assistance. We try to connect colleagues under threat and their families in numerous ways. But before I go and tell you the ways, I want to emphasize one aspect, and that is their families. Because people subjected to these human rights abuses, it's not only they are not the only ones affected. Their families are profoundly affected by these arrests or abductions or concerns. And so we try to reach out to the families as much as possible in terms of all of these instances. Other things that we do is we try to provide pro bono lawyers that will help people, connecting people with lawyers within their own countries. We try to provide give other support provider connections to people. We try to connect people with professional colleagues to allow them to develop and maintain links with the international scientific community. Sometimes, especially when people have been forced out of their academic job, they no longer have access to literature or with colleagues, and we try and have had a little bit of success connecting them with uh, other colleagues so they can maintain their professional standings. And finally, we try to uh, work with organizations that assist academic placement and fellowship uh, all the way through. In terms of our outreach, we do a lot of different things. These include promoting symposia and webinars, and you can see here by the titles that we've had several different things on a number of different aspects, uh, especially displaced people, digital technology, attacks on scientists and health professionals during the pandemic. And most recently, we had a two-day symposium in conjunction with the National Academy of Engineers about issues at the intersection of engineering and human rights. Another thing that we do is at the annual meetings of the National Academies, we have a session for the members, and one of the recent ones, well, one from last year at the uh, National Academy of Science was about scientists under fire, and where we had panelists including Tony Fauci, Peter Hotez, Akiko Iwasaki, and Michael Mann, uh, talking about how they have been targeted and what this meant for their professional work. We also try to provide human rights resources to people. These are on our website. So, for example, 2023, we had a whole series of resources about climate change and human rights. Before that, supporting Ukrainian scientists, engineers, and healthcare workers, and preventing and responding to digital threats. And another thing that we put together, which is available as a poster that people can put up in their labs, which I've done in mine, is a way of talking about human rights in science and engineering and medicine called 8 Things You Can Do to Promote These. And again, that's on our website. In addition to all this work, we are also we don't work alone. We connect up with many human rights organizations, but I want to talk about one in particular, and that is the International Human Rights Network of Academies and Scholarly Societies, a very long name for what is really human rights groups in different national academies around the world. Um, we have this shared interest in human rights. It was started about 32 years ago by the Dutch human rights lawyer Peter van Dijk and 3 Nobel laureates, Francois Jacob in France, Torsten Wiesel, then in the United States, and Max Perutz in the United Kingdom, who thought it would be important to bring together interested people from all of these academies. Our 3 main activities are the defense of scientific colleagues suffering human rights abuses, public statements on topical issues of global concern, and a biennial meeting to discuss issues and join forces and hear from different groups that are doing this. And there have been more than 80 academies that have participated in these human rights network activities. To tell you what our latest concern is, our last meeting was last year or 2 years ago now, uh, in Pretoria, South Africa. And there, the main topic of conversation was equity and international collaborations. But the next meeting is going to be in the summer in June in Oslo, and we're talking mainly, I think, about academic freedom and attacks on researchers. Let me switch now to talking more about medicine and some of the things that we're concerned about in that regard. And a lot of this has been informed, I have to say, by this really wonderful book by Leonard Rubinstein called Perilous Medicine, and talking about protecting healthcare during times of conflict. And he's at Johns Hopkins. We are very much helped by the interaction with him, as you'll see in a bit. But just to give you some sort of idea about what's going on, because in the news we only hear about a couple of things. But this is a map, this was in 2021, of armed conflicts actually affecting about 1/4 of all people on Earth. And this is also an outdated slide, but this was from Physicians on Human Rights about a year after the war in the Ukraine began, saying that there were more than 1,000 attacks on healthcare facilities in the Ukraine. And as you undoubtedly heard on the news, this is not restricted to Ukraine. It's also in Syria. It was also in Syria. It's also in Palestine. It's also really, unfortunately, all over the world that health facilities are being targeted. I'm not entirely sure about the general numbers on this slide, but they were a slide from Rohini Har saying that before the conflict in Syria, the total number of suspected measles cases was 11. I think it probably is more likely to be in the low hundreds. But that's for a 10-year period. After that, the total number of cases jumped to 30,000, over 30,000 in just the 4 years between 2015 and 2019, so on. Another consequence of conflict, this talking about the conflict in the First and Second Congo Wars, is that for every violent death, there were probably 62 nonviolent deaths that resulted from the conflict. And you can see how they're divided here. The other problem, of course, with conflict is refugees and internally displaced persons, or IDPs. And at the end of 2023, the number was over 117 million people displaced worldwide. They issued an interim report in 2024, and I think it was June, and I think then the number had been, I think, over 122 million that had been forcibly displaced, whether internally or cross borders. So it's a major concern. It's a major health concern of how these people actually can get health care. There's also the targeting of medical personnel. I'll give you one example of this. Another wonderful book by Hasan Baev, who is a Chechen surgeon who during the Chechen War took care of both injured Chechen individuals as well as Russian soldiers that had been injured as well. and as a result, was sort of sought after and not in a good way by members of both sides and had to leave the country. And he wrote this book about it. But there have been a number of attacks against health professionals doing their jobs in many countries. So, for example, there will be for example, a protest, and maybe the police will injure some of the protesters. And then when doctors go to help them, they have been targeted. And this has happened in, among other places, Bahrain, Sudan, and Turkey. And unfortunately, in the United States, where protesters after um, the George Floyd murder were actually when they went to assist, protesters were interfered with by police in Minnesota, Colorado, Washington State, Texas, and New York. Um, in my letters to the governors of these places, or in the case of New York, the mayor of New York, I said that I had written letters uh, talking about attacks against health professionals doing their jobs in foreign countries, but I never believed I would be writing them for uh, people in the United States. But unfortunately, that was not true. Um, there's also violence against emergency personnel, and there's a recent document last year from the American College of Emergency Physicians, and I've given the website for this, where they asked physicians, uh, have you or your colleague been threatened or attacked in 2023? And 1,980 emergency rooms physicians responded, and over 90% of them said yes, either they or a colleague was attacked in 2023. Then they asked another question, which I find quite interesting. They said, do you feel your employer's response was appropriate? And only 68% said no, and 50% said nothing was done to this. Clearly something that needs to be uh, acted upon, I feel. So really, after Len's book came out and we started thinking about this, the CHR decided that it would be one of the things that Len said in his book and has said publicly has been that when a journalist is subject of a human rights abuse, all journalists seem to get together to support him or her and are outraged at what happened. But he felt that health professionals did not do this, that they did not come together to work together for the human rights of all health professionals. And so that motivated us to try to put together a forum to address these attacks on health professionals. And I want to show you the list of participants of that. We have quite a number of different people different groups that have joined in these discussions. This was started about 2 years ago, and we've had about, I think, 6 or 8 meetings of the group to discuss various issues. One of the things that came out of it, although not endorsed by all these committee members, but by many of the people that participate in this, is an article that came out recently in Lancet on mobilizing the health community to protect healthcare from attack. And I'd like to sort of quote a bit from that to show, to say what has been done and the suggestions we made for the future. And so what has been done, several groups, and I'll list them at the end, have issued statements that demand that assaults cease, or offering practical guidance to frontline health workers in addressing violence against healthcare and emergencies, or preventing violence in the workplace, or urging legislative reforms to stop political interference in clinical decisions regarding the health of patients. And the organizations that have done this, and they're all listed in our that article, are listed here. But what other things can be done? Well, quite a lot, as you can see. We suggest that organizations advocate to repeal laws subjecting health providers to criminal sanctions for ethical and evidence-based practice, that they should invest resources in effective advocacy for governments to hold perpetrators of violence accountable, advocate for strengthening of domestic criminal law that protects healthcare workers from violence in the US and elsewhere, press governments and international institutions to hold perpetrators of war crimes against healthcare facilities and individuals to account, engage with militaries to implement UN Security Council Resolution 2286. This is the resolution that calls for practical measures for the protection of wounded and sick and medical services. These practical measures should be incorporated in the planning and conducting of military operations. One would think that these were actually part of the Geneva Conventions, but this is sort of a reminder that they are. They should also campaign for enforcing domestic and international laws that prevent the transfer of arms to military forces that breach international laws, especially those affecting healthcare workers, patients, and facilities. They should support colleagues at risk of threat and violence, and to insist that health personnel around the world can work safely. They should raise the visibility of threats to and violence against colleagues in professional journals, newsletters, at meetings and conferences, and support members who speak out about the threats. And finally, they should establish programs and resources to actually support health workers caught in violence. What are our current concerns now on the Committee on Human Rights? These include addressing violence against healthcare professionals and facilities, as I've outlined, protecting health workers in conflict situations, responding to challenges of forced displacement. We're concerned about the global crackdown of academic freedom. Somehow I went back when I shouldn't have gone back, and addressing conflicts of that. And finally, incorporating human rights into STEM and medical education. And let me just quickly give one example of what this can be. And that's the work of Ana Maria Di Leonardo, Mary Claire King, and Christian Orrego in Argentina. And let me explain how I use this in my teaching, and maybe it'll give people ideas about further things in medical teaching. This is what we usually teach in the beginning of genetics. We talk about Mendel's peas, and we talk about all this work and how traits segregate. And I'm pretty sure that at the end of the first lecture in introductory genetics, people are pretty bored. They think, how does this relate in any way to me? At which point, I usually bring up this article talking about the work of the people on the previous slide that was in Nature in 1987 about using simple Mendelian expression to reunite children that had been or who had been abducted with their parents during the dirty war in Argentina in the 70s and were given to other people. Sometimes it was people like Paula Eva Lagares here, who was 2 years old when she and her parents were abducted. Her parents were disappeared. They were killed. She was given away to another family. Other times we know that there were women that were pregnant that were arrested or picked up, allowed to come to term. Their baby was given away to other people, and they were killed. And what Mary Claire King and others just worked out is that they could use simple expression levels, in this case, the expression of the HLA blood type, and show that because of the distribution of probabilities, um, that given the fact that she is an AE variant, that would only come about maybe 6% of the time or less in that individual. But the probability at large of this coming about would only be about 1/100%. So 600 times difference between the two populations, being from the parents that claimed her, which refused to give their information, or the family that it appears to be. A judge decided this was overwhelming evidence and reunited her with her grandparents. And by order of the court, she moved to her grandparents' house, where she went directly to her room and asked for a doll that she had not seen since she was 2 years old. So to me, this uh, when I've taught this, brought this issue into the classroom, all of a sudden people wake up and they start looking at it and become, I think, a little more interesting. So we're looking for more examples of how we can use human rights ideas in the teaching of both undergraduates and medical students and graduate students. So with that, thank you very much, and I will take questions. Stop sharing of my slides. Don't know if there's any
Thank you,
questions.
Dr. Chalfie, for that excellent talk. What questions or thoughts do we have in our audience?
Thank you so much for a comprehensive and thoughtful talk. It seems like some of the scope of this human rights group includes conflicts all over the world. And my question is, how do you identify partners all over the world that are, if you're suggesting this person work with such an attorney, how do you identify reliable partners in different parts of the world?
So that's a terrific question. And the answer to that is we've built up a network of people that we know we can trust over time. We also are exceptionally careful. In the almost 50-year history of the Committee on Human Rights, one of the guiding principles that we've had is we don't want to do something that would perhaps embarrass the national academies. So we're very careful about making sure that people have not been involved in violence, and that's a basis for the activity. We are very careful about connecting with people that and building up a network in various places that allows us to know who we can rely on. So we vet things exceptionally carefully, and don't just, here's a lawyer and we don't know anything about that person. We try very hard to get as much information about people and to help them as much as possible, because if you don't provide good information to people, it's not really worth it.
We have a question in the chat. What changes in your group considering terms of structure, work, governance, et cetera, with the new administration? These will undoubtedly be challenging times for human rights in so many ways.
They are, and we do talk about this, but we have always worked on behalf of people in the United States as well as other countries. So this is, in a sense, not something that one could say is a new concern of ours. We have been concerned about human rights abuses all over the world. I think, and maybe I might be wrong about this, but if any of you are members of Amnesty International, I remember when I first joined it, the idea was one never worked in one's own country on a human rights issue because that would put you at risk, other than working on the death penalty. We still feel that we should be working on this, and I hope I, I expect that we will continue. Seems to be another
What
chat.
other questions? Yeah, what other questions do we have?
It looks like a partial. It seems more like a statement, or if this person could continue or ask what the question is.
I think it's less of a question and more, well, more of a, I guess, a question. How do you think people who are not in the academies should get involved? And what do you see in the importance of involved in this activity?
That's a great question. So let me say that in the past, we I think there are now two primary ways to do this. Maybe three, yes. Maybe more as I think about the question. The first is clearly that we really invite people to use all the resources that are on our website. And so being able to connect up and see what we're doing, I think, is very important. Second, we have a newsletter. Second, we hear about cases from all sorts of individuals, and we want to hear more. So should any of the people listening to this talk know of situations where health professionals, for example, are at risk anywhere in the world, we would like to know about that. Sometimes you know of colleagues that you hear about things. We hear, for example, about 20% of our cases are the individuals we've worked on behalf of from other members of the National Academy. We hear a lot from human rights organizations. We get input from a number of different places, but people should not feel that they cannot contact us about information. The third way that people can be involved is, I mentioned this briefly, we have a monthly newsletter that is going out, which has information about what we've done, public information about what we've done, a review of articles that have been published in the previous month, any other activities that are open to the general public, And we list all of these in this monthly update. And we are trying very hard to set this up so that this goes to more people. Right now, it does go to people outside the National Academy, so people can set up. What I don't think we have quite yet today is a way that people can go on the website and simply enter their names to do that. But we're going to try to set that up very soon.
And Marty, I put in the chat a link to the poster that we have.
Right.
I think it's an important resource to have, and sort of the kinds of things that why you can get and what the things you can do.
Let me say one other thing about the poster, which I didn't talk about in the presentation, and that is if you go to the version online and click on any one of the 8 different things that you do, that brings you to a resource page with all sorts of ideas on those topics. So it's not simply a poster, it's really the front face of a lot of resources that we have put together. Okay.
We have an additional question in the chat. How does the committee select and prioritize its projects with so many human rights abuses around the world without politicizing its objectivity and standards?
So we're currently looking at about 113 cases around the world in 26 different countries that we are looking at right now. And as I said, every time we work on behalf of someone, we investigate that a great deal. It's not like we hear about something on the news and the next day we issue statements about that. We investigate things quite thoroughly and try to determine who we should be writing to and what we should be writing about. But we do not reject anyone. There have been some cases where we have worked on behalf of rather large groups, and so that has not been included in that 1,502 cases that I talked about. So, for example, several years ago, a group of over 1,000 academics in Turkey signed a statement about they're concerned about attacks against Kurds, and they were all dismissed from their academic appointments. At other times, I think it was the entire medical, the governing body of the Medical Association of Turkey issued a statement, and they were all dismissed from their posts as well. We've worked in terms of all of them. So I don't know of anyone who's fit our criteria that we have not worked on behalf of.
Any other questions? And otherwise, just for attendees, please remember to scan the QR code, or you can click on the link that comes out in the subsequent email. We would love your feedback on Grand Rounds and today's presentation, and filling out the evaluation will allow you to obtain your CME.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it.
If I could add
right.
one final thing,
Absolutely.
was my first slide, but I will add it again now. My email address is mc21, it's fairly easy to remember, at columbia.edu. If you have any other questions or want to send me a comment privately, very happy to get those emails. So please feel free. And you already know that Carlos is on the committee as well. So he is a great source of information as well about us or concerns. So again, thank you all very much. I appreciate being able to have a chance to talk.
Thank you for being here. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your afternoon.